Well, it's World Sanskrit Day tomorrow, but let's get down to basics. Let's today talk about the several values this language has carried for decades at length. Sanskrit is often called the language of the gods, but it's also the language of poets, of scientists, rulers, and surprisingly, even modern coders. This Saturday marks World Sanskrit Day. It's time to the Shravan Purnima, a date that in ancient Gurukuls was the start of the academic year and the day students renewed their vow to learning its literary heritage. It runs deep, it goes back to centuries, even before Shakespeare became Europe's poetic benchmark. We'll talk about all of those poetic achievements that have come through the language.
Sanskrit poets like Kalidas, Magh had already mastered simile, metaphor and drama. Sanskrit's reach goes far beyond India's borders. Indonesia's national motto, its currency carries Sanskrit words. Malaysia's religious and cultural vocabulary borrow from it.
We'll also talk about the royal titles. For instance, in Thailand, inscriptions in Cambodia, Nepal's national anthem, also Sinhala in Sri Lanka, all shaped by Sanskrit roots. Interesting connection to German as well. German shows structural parallels with researchers, experts studying its shared Indo-European ancestry. What makes it remarkable is its precision. One word, one pronunciation, no schedule versus schedule confusion. All of that is going to be decoded by experts. It's a strict grammar rule that's kept this language intact, has made it a model for logic, influencing programming, language tools, and much more.
But while Hebrew, which remember was once considered dead, was revived into use every day in communities around the world, including in Israel, Sanskrit remains for most Indians something to be recited, something to be studied in class 10, but not spoken any further. Fear of getting it wrong often keeps so many from trying. So can Sanskrit move from the temple and the textbook back into daily life? Should it? And more importantly, is this already happening?
Joining us this morning, cultural scholar and orator Dushyanth Sridhar. Very good morning, Mr. Sridhar. Thank you for taking out the time. I know you have a packed schedule, so thank you once again. Also with us is Professor P.R. Mukund, deeply engaged in preserving Vedic manuscripts. Who better than both these gentlemen to really tell us what Sanskrit brings to the table, and not today, but for years at length. Can I begin with you, Professor Mukund? Tell us, first things first, what is so great about this language we're talking about? What is so special about it?
Yeah, actually, when you look at different languages, one thing that makes the Sanskrit stand out more than anything else is its etymology. For example, if you take any word in any language, before I say that, every language, the words that you find in the language is actually external manifestation of a way of thought, a way of thinking, a way of living. And as far as other languages are concerned, there are words that describe specific objects or thoughts or actions. But in Sanskrit, it's slightly different in the sense that nirvachana, as it's called, the etymology, will actually take you to the root of that particular meaning of that particular word, right? So because of that, we can actually go in depth into any word and actually find out what the meaning is. That's one thing I can think of. The second thing I can think of is the structure. Grammatical, so I'm not a grammarian, I'm not a linguist, but from what little I know, the structure that is there in the Sanskrit language is perhaps the best suited for even computing languages, for example.
Lovely. Okay, and we're going to double click on exactly that, Professor, in a little while from now, just to understand the debate around that. We're going to go right now to cultural scholar and orator Dushyanth Sridhar for our next question. Sir, thank you for joining us here on the show early in the morning. If we could just first come to you and ask you, for most people watching this, so not for you and not for Professor P.R. Mukund, but for most people watching this, Sanskrit is something they engage with for maybe 3 years, 4 years of their life in school. For the rest of their lives, they say, I studied it at one point, I know some words, they maybe quote an example, but it's not an actively practiced language. And I'm not talking about you or Professor P.R. Mukund. So I want to understand first, what is your thought on that? How do we change that? How do we make it a more actively practiced language? How do we integrate it more in our culture? Tell us.
Namaskaram, Krutsmeen and Toya, and very happy to see Sri Mukundji in this panel as well. Happy for having me on the breakfast show. Coming to Sanskritam as a bhasha,
Right.
the bhasha has just not influenced itself, it has influenced various other Bharatiya languages. So if you take up to the correct or the Sahitya Telugu or Kannada or Malayalam that is spoken in Dakshina Bharata in South India, a majority of the words are derived from Sanskritam. Even the Telugu and the Kannada and the Malayalam scholars agree with that. And let us take all our names, the names of people, both men and women, across Bharatadesham, be it Uttara Bharatam or Dakshina Bharatam. They're all from Sanskritam. So in fact, my mother tongue is Tamil. And a majority of the chief ministers who have ruled for a very long time the state of Tamil Nadu, which supposedly the political circle is not very for Sanskritam or Hindi, have Sanskrita names. M.G. Ramachandran,
Right.
Janaki Ramachandran, Jayalalita, Kamaraj. So I think the land is waiting for a Tamil name-based chief minister as of now. So the point is, Kutsmeen, you'll be amazed. While I had to deliver lectures in Jakarta, which is the Rajdhani, the capital of Indonesia, the archipelago nation, the person who drove me the car performed namaz. And I congratulated him, stating that you're following your dharma. May I know what is your name? He said his name was Aditya. So the Muslim who performed namaz in Indonesia, his name was Aditya. And when they welcome you in any shop in Indonesia, they say Jai Subhadra, Jai Arjuna. Both these names are Sanskrita names.
Right.
So a language doesn't necessarily have to be a spoken language to live. It can live through different ways. And one such means is it has percolated and pervaded every Bharatiya language. And in fact, the grammatical patterns. And to add what to Mukunda Shri Ji said, one thing, we must feel that we own Sanskritam. See, we should own the language. For example, if somebody asks a person in a tier 2 or a tier 3 town in India who may not be well versed in English, he cannot even frame a sentence in English, but if he is asked, what are the languages you know? The person proudly says, I know English. So when a person who can't frame a sentence in English says, I know English, why can't people who know various words in Sanskritam say that I know Sanskritam? You don't have to be a pro at it. If you take up a person who has to say that I'm a pro at English, then Tharoor will be the only person probably stating that I know English well. Right. So the point is, every language has its beauty. And one more thing that I have to add to what Mukundji said, the ancient school of mathematics like Sangamagrama and Aryabhatiyam and so on and so forth, as we have relished in India in the last 2000 plus years, has been written, the formulae have been written in Sanskritam, because Sanskritam has a specific numbering system called Katapaya Adi Sankhya.
Right.
So every akshara, every letter is assigned a digit. For example, we call Mahabharata one of the greatest works. It's bigger than Iliad and Odyssey and the Paradise Lost and Gained put together. The original name for Mahabharata is called Jaya. Why? Because Ya stands for 8-1, and when you reverse it, it becomes 18. So in the Mahabharata, there are 18 parvas. There is Bhagavad Gita, which has 18 chapters. The Yuddha was fought for 18 days, and the number of battalions that fought on both sides were 11 plus 7, 18. So 18 is denoted by the name Jaya. So if you take up any work in Sanskritam, the formula, the mathematical formula is given based on the digits. For example, Aryabhatta says, Chatur Adhika Shatam Ashtagunam Dvasashti Ayutascha. He talks about 4 more than 100, 104 into 8 plus 62,000, which is 62,832 divided by 20,000, which will give you 3.14. So he talks about the value of pi that is used to decide and design the Vedika, the Agni Kunda, while performing Agnihotra. So all our mathematicians have also relied on Sanskritam as a language to decide the mathematical formulae with respect to etymology, like how he said. So I can give more and more examples. I'll just wait for more of your
So
questions.
happy you've touched on Aryabhatta, though. That we were going to do that. Please, yeah.
No, I was also going to say we need more people like Mr. Sridhar to really, start quizzing people whenever he has a conversation with anyone, like he did with me. So when I spoke to him yesterday, he was quick to ask me a question and said, "Tell me what this means." So I think we need more of that in our country. But Professor Mukund, and I think both of you all will be in agreement to this. You've briefly touched upon this as well, that we're actually using a lot of Sanskrit in our daily vocab. It's just that people are not aware of it. Professor Mukund, would you want to come in and give us a few examples so that there's basic awareness around the fact that, look, you're actually practicing this and you must now own that story, as Mr. Sridhar also pointed out.
Definitely. By the way, I should also say that it's a pleasure to be on the same forum with Sridharji. My mother tongue happens to be Kannada. I'm also from the south, and we use many words. I would say perhaps 70 to 80% of the words are actually Sanskrit based. That's the variation may be there in percentages, but it's very true of many Indian languages, if not all. So I'll just give you one example, right? I was saying earlier that our communication can be enhanced if only we look at the Sanskrit base that is involved. One word I can think of is Deva. Everybody uses that, right? Deva. Now, what happens is if you stop somebody on the street in Bangalore and say, what does that mean? He'll say God. It's a tragedy, in my opinion, that we have to extract the meaning of our own words in terms of an alien language, which is not even suitable for that. If you actually look at there are two things. One is what is called nirvachana, that's the etymology of the thing, and also dhatupad, that's the root meaning of the word, of the sounds that are there in that particular word. Deva actually means that entity which is a source of all light in the universe, be it sunlight or moonlight or whatever. So when you think of it that way, you're using the same word, but instead of saying God, if you think of it in these terms, it is actually enough for me to contemplate on that and meditate on that for the rest of my life, actually, right? Been looking at all the different light sources that are there, the stars, the sun and the moon and so on. So every single word that I can think of where the root is actually Sanskrit based, I think that by just exposing, you don't have to become Sanskrit Pandita, right? But at least slowly, if you and I can learn the meaning of some of these words, I really do believe that communication not only goes to an elevated space, but more than that, our lives are more enriched, in my opinion, because when you contemplate on these things, we are actually going deeper and deeper into our thought process and our culture, are not depending on an alien language and alien culture.
Can we, keeping to the exact point you made, I want to go over to Dushyanth, and Professor, we'll ask you the same question after that. What is Dushyanth, coming to you, what is a phrase or a word that you have found in Sanskrit literature that has stayed with you, that carries a meaning that you don't think any English word can quite convey?
There are very many similes and metaphors itself are very beautifully used, deployed by Kalidasa, Magha, Sriharsha, and so on. It is once said, I'll just give you a very quick narration of this. There was a great poet called Sriharsha, and he gave us the kavyam called Naishadham. He has also given a beautiful philosophical work called Khandana Khanda Kavyam. So he was on his route from Kashmir to Varanasi seeking job, and he sat by the banks of Ganga and he saw two women fight in the local language, not in Sanskritam, but he didn't know that language. So he was blessed with a mantra called Chintamani by Saraswati for memory power. When this fight between the two women reached the court of the king said, "Is there any witness to it?" And the witness was Sriharsha. Sriharsha told the king in Sanskritam that I didn't understand a word they said in the local language, but I can just reproduce whatever they have said because I've just memorized what they've said. So he reproduced and the judgment was declared, and he was made a court poet for his memory skills and for his presentation skills and poetic skills. But his poetry was so very complicated in Sanskritam that the king said that you need to take a sabbatical, you need to take a month off, go to some resort, relax yourself, and then be back so that you give us in a language, in a dialect of Sanskritam which is understandable to the masses, praja. He goes, and the king is unable to withstand the loss of such an intelligent poet from his court. So he sends his soldiers to fetch him back. While he was to be fetched back to the court, the poet was having some vadas made of urad dal. So the soldiers asked, "Oh, you seem to be relaxing here. What are you eating? What are you munching?" So he says, "Asesha shesha musha masha shisheve." So because purusha kim kurushe, they ask. The letter is sha. So he takes the cue of using that sha and constructs a complicated sentence stating that I'm having that particular dish which is made from the remains of urad dal which has been soaked in water for many days. So ashesha shemushi musha masha shisheve. So the way the poets have constructed, when you deal with Kalidasa, when you deal with Harsha, you will just fall in love with the way they've composed poetry. Of course, I do relish Keats, I do relish Robert Frost and Shakespeare, but I would say they were 1,200 years before them, and the grandeur of the poetry is intense. And one last point. Now you said a word. You know, there is a word called Dvijaha. It's a single word. It's called Dvijaha. Now, Dve. Now you must have heard of words like Dvivedi. That's a surname which is found very commonly in Uttara Bharatam. Dvi. So can you guess what could these Dvi mean? Anything that can you guess?
It doesn't mean two.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So Dvi is two, correct? So you call now Dvijaha. So we call the mother as Janani in Sanskritam. The one who has mothered us is called Janani. The motherland is called Janma Bhumi. The birth-death cycle is called Jani. So anything related to birth uses the word Ja. Dvi is two, like how the both of you suggested. Ja denotes birth. So Dvijaha means the one who is twice born. Now, interestingly, the tooth that we have is twice born because it comes as the milk teeth, falls off, and then comes as the permanent teeth. So since it is twice born, the tooth is called Dvijaha. Interestingly, birds in zoology are referred to as oviparous because unlike us, they don't come directly from their mother. They come from the mother as the egg. That gets incubated, and the incubated egg at the right time hatches to become the chick. So there is a two-stage process. So birds are also referred to as Dvijaha. If you take a person who has to learn the Gayatri mantra, you will be surprised. The person is born from the mother once in whichever hospital. It could be St. Philomena, St. Martha's, it could be Apollo, whichever hospital. So that is birth number 1. At the age of 7, if the boy undergoes Gayatri Mantropadesham from the father, from that day, that is regarded as birth number 2. So the boy who has undergone the thread ceremony is called Dvijaha. The tooth is called Dvijaha. The bird is called Dvijaha. So interestingly, Dvijaha means twice born. So you will have to decide the meaning of the word based on the context in which the poet has deployed that word. So everything about Sanskritam is beautiful.
Very
While I say this,
fascinating,
I'm doing with the caveat, every Bharatiya language is beautiful. I'm not exaggerating because I speak Tamil, I speak Telugu, I speak Kannada, I can understand Malayalam, I speak Hindi. Every language is beautiful. But when you come to Sanskritam, it is so very strongly rooted in grammar and various other allied faculties that it has inspired so many languages. See, to be a superstar and inspiring so many Bharatiya languages in itself is like a Bharat Ratna. So that's why we have Yoga Kshemam Vahamyaham and LIC policy. All our PSUs have some relation with our scriptures. So everything about Sanskritam is beautiful. I think it's a good topic to discuss over a break.
Okay. Yeah, that's why there's so much curiosity, Mr. Sridhar, around wanting to learn this language. That's why you have, all these premier institutions, Oxford, Cambridge, all of them offering some very interesting courses in Sanskrit. I have the last 1 minute, and Professor Mukund, what I do want you to come in on, and there's so much talk going on about how this Kadak grammatical structure makes for a beautiful model for tech, AI, computer science. So if you could just give us a little bit of gyan on that, the last 1 minute we have.
Sure. See, the thing is that when you look at computing languages, structure is very, very important, because when when a computer, a machine, is actually parsing through various instructions, if the structure is not there, it's very difficult. That's point number one. Point number two is, when you look at the hardware, the software is always implemented in the hardware, right? So the hardware itself is a structured piece of circuitry. I happen to be coming from that field, so I know that how difficult it is to have. If you take like a 1 inch by 1 inch piece of silicon, we can put billions of transistors in that. They're all connected to each other. They all have to communicate with each other. So when you look at such a complex system, it is very, very important that structure is there at every single level. At a language level, at an implementation level, even at a basic circuit level, right? So for us to implement something in hardware, the software that actually is running on that particular chip has to be structured as well. And that's the reason things taken from Sanskrit is actually implemented in computer languages as well.
Wonderful. Professor, thank you for joining us. And Dushyanth, thank you for joining us. You both have spread such passion today on the show. You've told us so many stories. It has been so lovely to just be held spellbound by both of you. Happy World
Thank you.
Sanskrit Day to both.